So you mentioned belongingness, and I think this is something that we all look for at work. We crave it, right? We want to be part of a community. Jeff Pfeffer wrote a chapter a little over a decade ago talking about how we're basically working alone at this point. We're losing a sense of community in our workplaces.
Yeah.
When I've looked at the data, especially in the US, people are much less likely to have friendships at work than they did a few decades ago.
Yep.
And it seems like the social fabric that we're looking for at work is disintegrating at some level. What have you found is most critical to reestablishing that and giving people a sense that they truly belong?
The first is most sort of primal. It's proximity, physical face-to-face proximity. Being in the same space together for vast chunks of time that's the killer app. That's the way we're wired. You're more likely to respond favorably to a request face-to-face versus email. The difference is 34 times. So with successful groups, you see, especially with creative groups, if you're just talking about productivity, you can succeed kind of alone. But if you're talking about creative groups, proximity ends up being really important.
Yeah. Where does that take you on flexible working and teleworking? Because you've probably seen there's a meta-analysis that came out a decade ago now showing that as long as you work at least 2.5 days a week in the office, there's no cost to productivity. And people are more satisfied when they get to work from home a little bit.
Right.
There's that recent Nick Bloom experiment showing that if you let call center workers work from home, they're 13% more productive. And it's not just because they save commute time, it's also that they've been given real autonomy, right? They have flexibility about where they work, when they work, how they work.
Yep.
They don't feel like they're being micromanaged.
Yep.
How do you reconcile that with the fact that you want people to have real proximity together?
Right. Well, you have to divide up the parts of your work that you need proficiency from the ones that you need creativity, those two domains, right? If it is just pure productivity, then remote work actually works pretty well. If you're not talking about making people happy, you're talking about being productive. Creativity work, it's really different. It's a different animal. Those studies, Ben Weber did an interesting study where he had teams of engineers remotely deal with problems and teams of engineers face-to-face deal with problems. And the face-to-face ones, I think the ratio was 38-8. So they brought up the problem, they talked about the problem 4 times more often when they were face-to-face. It just came up. It just came up, and that's how we're built. If we were having this conversation on Skype, it would be 4 times more boring.
I have a problem with that, though, which is I almost exclusively work from home.
Yep.
I only write from home unless I'm on an airplane. Are you telling me that I would be 4 times more creative if I went into an office?
Depend on the creative part of your work. A lot of your work is about productivity, right? If you're writing a book, and I know how that feels, where it feels like digging a ditch. And that ditch digging part of it, of going over and over again.
I'd actually never seen it that way, but now I'm going to feel like I'm going into a ditch.
I'm sorry to
Thanks
show
for
you
that
horrible existential truth. Let's make it better. More like building a house. It's more like building a house.
A little better.
So a lot of times when you're hammer and nails or putting up boards, that is efficient to be by yourself. But if you're designing how the ceiling should look or deciding on the layout, you should be in with a group.